Welcome back to Believe in Badgers on the Believe Network, presented by betonline.ag and Oakbridge Wealth Management. I'm Matt Perkins, joined as always by Badger legend, the Hebrew Hammer himself, Matt Bernstein. Bernie, how are we doing today?
Yeah, we're great. Every day on the podcast with you, Matty Perkins, is a holiday. I'm really excited about today with one of my friend for probably like 20 years covering the Badgers. Ooh, it's going to be a good one. Who knows what we covered, but it's going to be great.
It's going to be a lot of fun here. We have legendary writer, I would say, Jeff Potrykus here with us today on the podcast for some Badger stories, some Badger insights, and hopefully what should be a pretty lively conversation, I imagine.
Yeah, legendary when you're in your 60s and you remember Bernie from about 30 years ago.
Oh, wow. Yes, Jeff, it's been about 20.
Yeah.
Everyone, yes, it feels like it's been 30 though, body-wise, but 20. Although, Jeff, the last 2 years have aged me drastically watching the Badgers and having two kids. So we'll get into it. Oh man, I'm excited for this one.
We will.
Well, I hope you still have viewers and listeners after this episode today.
One way or another, they will either love us or leave us. And that is, well, for better or for worse, that's how it's going to be. That's how it is in the media game, as you well know, Jeff. So before we get into that, though, want to remind everyone that we continue to be presented by betonline.ag, the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting. From the earliest odds to in-game live betting, BetOnline provides you with all the action and the ability to watch the games as they happen. With the largest selection of odds on everything from football, NBA, college basketball, NHL to UFC, head on over to betonline.ag today and use our promo code BELIEVE. That's BLEAV for your welcome bonus on your first deposit. Bet online, the game starts here. And of course, we continue to be proudly presented by our main man, Chris Anicetti, and his entire team at Oakbridge Wealth Management. If you are a pro, future pro, or current NCAA athlete with NIL deals, Chris is the man that you need to connect with to get your money right. Over at Oakbridge, Chris and his team of professionals will create a comprehensive financial plan to set you up to navigate your lifestyle and future market conditions. Oakbridge specializes in wealth management for professional athletes. They understand all of the pressures that they face every single day. Chris and his team will set you up with a bespoke financial plan to make your money work for you off the field so you can focus on what you do best, perform on the field. Get in touch with Chris on Instagram at OakbridgeWM_Anicetti. That's OakbridgeWM_ANICETE, or head on over to the website oakbridgewealthmgmt.com. Chris Anicetti, Oakbridge Wealth Management. I can't believe, Jeff, that we're in a day and age where being a financial manager for college athletes is a lucrative business and a very fast-growing one. When you stepped onto the Badger beat 40 years ago, give or take, could you have ever imagined a world where that would be happening?
No, I mean, my first year up in Madison helping cover UW was 1995. And back then, the first 2 days of preseason camp were freshmen only. I mean, there were no vets. It allowed the coaches to get a really good look at the freshmen, kind of let the freshmen kind of ease in a little bit because, 99% of them were nervous as hell. No, there was no talk of NIL. There was no talk of transferring midseason, sitting out a bowl game, any of that stuff. Now, we can debate from here until 2054 whether any of that is good for the game, but no. I don't think that was on the mind of Barry Alvarez back then.
Oh, Jeff, you immediately brought back bad memories of the first 2 days of football camp, going out there, showing up with all of your stuff because there was nowhere. You just showed up to Wisconsin with 2 duffel bags full of stuff, clothing. And I don't even know if I had a computer at the time because they weren't that important. No cell phone. Nope. Oh man. It's funny reading the Chris Anicetti stuff, but it's true. Like, this is so important. NIL, Jeff, obviously the NIL and the transfer portal have either revolutionized college football or destroyed it, however you want to look at it. But I actually want to talk about this because Fickell said he wants to recruit guys and bring his dudes in, create the culture, create a program, not building teams each year, but creating a culture. I stood on my pillbox this year, Matt Perkins knows, and said, don't go to the portal for a quarterback. Let's win or lose with the guys we have. Or you send a message that you're not trying to really win with your guys that you're recruiting. I see yesterday we're looking at the San Diego State University quarterback who actually looks like Minshew Mania, but neither here nor there. His look I like.
Yeah.
Jeff, what's your thought on that message from Fickell, and is doing that again and again and again going to be detrimental to the team?
Well, I think they're kind of caught in between two worlds. The recruit your high school players and develop them over time world, which, served this program well for decades, and the world of the portal where you have to, in an ideal world, it would be plug in a hole if a veteran guy leaves with another veteran. It's not, we need players at quarterback. We need players at tight end. We need players here, defensive line, secondary. That's where they are right now. It would take a lot of self-confidence and assurance from his bosses to say, you know what? We're not recruiting a quarterback out of the portal because we want to go with our guys. Because next year's schedule on paper looks really demanding. And what happens if you have a really difficult year and you miss a bowl game then next year? Are you there in year 4? I don't know. That you've got to think of those things as a head coach, as a guy building a program. Now, I do say that they have got to get off the portal conveyor belt for the quarterback position. They clearly, and you mentioned the kid from San Diego State, also looking at a kid from Maryland, also looking at a kid from Cal. God knows if it's going to stop there, because if you don't get any of those 3, you're still going to have to go look somewhere. And so they clearly, internally, when they look at who's left standing at quarterback, they don't believe that person is going to be prepared to lead the offense. New offense, old offense, whatever it is. So they're stuck right now. But eventually they've got to get off that conveyor belt. I don't know when it's going to happen. I don't even know if they know when it's going to happen.
Also, this year's portal quarterback class is not nearly as strong as the last couple years, it seems, at the moment. You don't have a Cam Ward. You don't have a Dylan Gabriel out there. It seems to be, I personally like the Mendoza, the kid from Cal, a lot. He seems like a very good leader, but his services are in very high demand. So it's going to be really interesting to see, should the Badgers end up with a portal quarterback, because Bernie, I think a lot of the comments from our last video were very much against you. I will say that people did not really enjoy that, but you are bringing me more and more onto your island, because I think, Jeff, that what Fickell said he wanted to do when he was first hired was marry the old with the new, right? Marry the best of Barry with the best of what he brings. And I think that idea of culture as being sort of the central point for that has to be done through recruitment and development. I don't think you can sort of stray from that.
No, but again, that's where I think that they're caught right now, because they're coming off a 5-7 year. He's looking at next year's schedule. He's no dummy. He knows it's on paper is demanding. He knows that he believes he needs some players at certain positions. And if he believes that some of the young guys they have in the program right now are not ready for primetime roles, or maybe only a couple of them are, they would be foolish not to look at the portal. The question is, will the program ever get back to the point where you don't have to depend on the portal to the high percentage that they have to this point? I'll say this about the quarterbacks, though. Jeff Grimes, the new offensive coordinator, the quarterback he had last year at Kansas, unless they sign a Cam Ward or Dylan Gabriel type this offseason, they're not going to have that type of quarterback at Wisconsin. I've seen that kid play. That kid's a stud. They're probably not going to have as good a tailback either as they had at Kansas, okay? But if they're going to an offense that isn't as quarterback-centric as the air raid was, you may not need a Cam Ward level type quarterback to have a more efficient offense. I was not a fan of Longo. I didn't like what he tried to do. I didn't like what he tried to do with certain players. So I'm curious to see if Grimes does a better job, just my opinion, in maximizing the skills of certain guys who you identify as playmakers and get them the ball more efficiently and effectively than Phil did.
So I have a couple questions. One, Matt Perkins, let me just say, I know my opinion is not popular. I know saying you're going to lose next year, but use your guys is not popular. I understand this completely. All I'm saying is you set a message. We're on a conveyor belt, Jeff, like you said, of getting guys. It is not fan experience. I want to win. I do. Every second of every day, I want to win. But if I'm buying a new jersey every year because a new tailback, a new quarterback, a new everything, that's not fun for me. And it's not building a program, it's building teams. And this is jumps right into my question. Ohio State can build a team each year that's going to win. Jeff, are we competitive in the NIL enough to build a team each year? Like, are we getting a quarterback, like Matt said, Mendoza? He's not going to fix it. He's not a Cam Ward. Are we shooting low because we just need to get through next year?
I don't think Wisconsin could consistently recruit with the Ohio States, Michigans, Oregons, Penn State of the world before NIL. Can Wisconsin keep up with what Oregon and Ohio State can do in the NIL world now? No. Now, revenue sharing is going to be a piece for everybody, but that's still separate from NIL. Mm-hmm. And if everybody's equal in revenue sharing, but certain teams have a significant advantage in the world of NIL, you're still going to be behind. So no, I don't think they can compete with them. And it's interesting because there was a philosophical change at some point because during the 2022 season, UW officials believed, hey, we can't recruit the same type of athlete as Ohio State. But if we build a team, we can maybe get them when we have a veteran team, and they may have a lot of talent, but we have a veteran team, they're less experienced, we can beat them. There was a philosophical change to, you know what? We're going to go head-to-head with those guys and recruit the same type of athletes they do. And if it ever happens, build a statue for the coach who's in charge of that team and the program at that time. But it's never happened. I've never seen it happen. And I don't know, for reasons we've talked about, that it's ever going to happen on a consistent basis.
So another question around the transfer portal and NIL. And we talked about Mendoza at Cal. I've always associated Cal, the university, as a top-tier academic university. What does transferring to Wisconsin? Wisconsin's a great school. I'm never taking anything away from it. But does academics even play a part in this anymore?
I don't think so. I mean, it's interesting. And I've had this conversation over time with people. People in my profession used to criticize coaches and programs for not, letting their athletes advance and take advantage of the educational opportunities that the scholarship presented. When was the last time you ever heard anybody complain, these guys transferring around, you're not going to allow them to get a good degree? No one cares about that anymore because you have athlete mobility and you have the opportunity to earn money. So no, it doesn't. I mean, I don't know the kid, don't know what he's looking for. He may just be looking for a place. I want a place where I can win more games, have more talent around me, enjoy more success on the field than I have. He may be looking for an educational opportunity as well. There are still those athletes who are out there like that. You know that. But, it'll be interesting to see. It could come down to money. It could come down to, which team has a better team where I can have a really good year on the field, both individually and with my teammates.
To be fair with Mendoza, he was committed to Yale before he ended up at Cal. So I don't think he's a dummy either way, like you said, Bernie. But it's more than just the quarterback position that they need to address in the portal. I think one of the things that, we saw this past year was an inability to stop the run and an inability to get pressure on the quarterback in the front two or front three or front four, or whatever you want to call it. It wasn't successful. How does Wisconsin actually build back up a run defense?
Well, this is going to sound like I'm singling out one person, and if it is, so be it. But if you look statistically at the numbers of Mike Tressel's defenses, wherever he's been, the stopping the run has not been what they've done best. It's always been a little bit vulnerable, and never to the level it was last season when they, I think, finished 92nd or something like that in the country in stopping the run. So, but that has always been statistically the Achilles heel. And even though you've got some teams in the Big Ten right now that, like Oregon or Penn State, that will spread you out, they're still going to run the ball. And if they find out you can't stop the run, they're just going to run it down your throats all day. So I think part of the problem is scheme. I think part of the problem is obviously they were thin on the defensive line last year. And that affects, Bernie, you know this, if your defensive linemen aren't eating up blocks, which is what previous schemes at Wisconsin have done. Those linemen, sometimes they make plays in the backfield. They would eat up a lot of blocks till the linebackers flow. It's going to affect your linebacker play. And I just see it as a combination of personnel and scheme and history.
I agree. I think it's scheme. I mean, that's, to me, it's all scheme. I thought we had some guys. So Jeff, what does it tell you that two of our potential, well, one was injured, but two of our starting defensive tackles are leaving this year? What does that tell you?
Again, there are so many reasons kids are leaving these days. NIL is obviously one factor, but that's back-to-back years. You're losing serviceable defensive linemen at a position group where you haven't replaced them yet, whether through the portal or through your own recruiting. For whatever the reasons are. Maybe you've told them, you know what, we're going to upgrade. Maybe you said, if you want more NIL, we don't have it for you because of our budget. And the kids have said, well, if you don't want me, I'm out. Or if you don't have the money, I'm out. Whatever the reasons are, that's one position group you can't afford to lose serviceable, experienced guys. Now, I've seen the reaction on social media, fans saying, well, we were thin on the defensive line last year and they weren't good. We're just going to replace them. Replace them with who? With what? Give me some names. And if these guys turn out to be game changers, that's fine. But right now, we don't know who's going to be on the defensive line. It'll probably be some portal guys. Ben Barton is one name to watch. The kid was a freshman last year from Illinois, when he flipped from Northwestern to Wisconsin when Fitzgerald was fired. He was forced into the fray last year, probably before he was ready physically or mentally. But other than that, I couldn't tell you who's going to be on defense in the rotation on the D line next year. I just don't know.
Matt Perkins, we got a bunch of guys actually recruited. They look good. That was 300-pounders.
Incoming freshmen. Yeah.
Incoming freshmen.
I think what's really interesting about this incoming freshman class is that there's 16 of them enrolling early. Which is a record. The previous record was 11, which was last year, Jeff. So I think at least when we talk about, some of their personnel strategy, they're getting more and more of these kids in early to, I don't want to say indoctrinate them, but to get them to buy in to everything still as mostly 17-year-olds or, barely 18-year-olds. What do you think that sort of shift, that's happening at college football at large, right? More and more kids are enrolling early. What has that done to both the recruitment process and sort of talent development?
Well, I think I'll handle the talent development first. The earlier you can get kids in and give them 15 spring practices, the better off for the player. And you have a better handle going into camp, whether that kid can help you in year one. I was there for the spring before I retired, and there are certain guys who you could see in the spring, you're like, some of the freshmen, you're like, okay, they may be physically gifted, but they don't look like they're in a position to help this team. And the two guys I'm thinking about, I'm not going to name them, but they didn't. They didn't see the field because you could tell they weren't ready. And there's nothing wrong with that. But you get them in early and at least you have an idea of what's going on. And the player comes in early, and with the portal now, he gets a better indication of where he sits in his unit grouping. How does he get along with his coaches? Maybe they're a little different, working with day to day than they were when they were recruiting him and saying, you're the best thing we ever have and we love you and you're number one on our board, et cetera, et cetera. That can be a culture shock for a lot of kids. So that's a good thing. But I'll say this about recruiting. I know everybody's really excited about the classes they've signed. I learned long ago, starting in 1995, I don't pay attention to any of that. I pay attention to what they look like when they get on campus. Because you don't know. I don't know who's doing the ratings. I don't know how the kids are going to react when they get on campus. And over years, I've seen a lot of kids who were not highly touted come in, and you could tell from day one, that kid's going to be a player. And I've seen a lot of kids come in who were highly touted, and you look at them and you go, who's rating these guys? It's a crapshoot. Other than like a guy like Reggie Bush. My mother could watch Reggie Bush's tape and go, that guy's going to be a really good player in college, Jeff. I mean, and I'm not obviously I'm exaggerating a little bit, but I've learned over time. Just wait till they get here. Look at Graham Mertz. Graham Mertz they had statues built for Graham Mertz before he got here, and he didn't pan out for a variety of reasons. And I understand why fans get excited, but just be patient and take a look see how guys get there, because they don't always, just because they're rated highly, they don't always pan out.
No, so what's interesting, so funny about what you're saying, Jeff, is, by the way, I love that, but the business has changed so drastically that, there's so many companies making so much money off of rating kids who are probably still in diapers, all the way up. I could probably find a rating on my daughter who might potentially play in the NFL. She's probably 0.01. She's
it's
also
not even just ratings now, though. It's like they are giving NIL valuation. They're assigning $1 to the kids as long as like 15, 16-year-olds and saying that is what this person is worth.
So, Jeff, how detrimental is that to somebody's mental? Like, I knew when I came to Wisconsin, I was worth nothing. I was a Class C out of Class D was the lowest. I knew that I could physically do it, but again, the mental part of the game, I wasn't ready. I just looked like a jabroni out there. But I also came in knowing, like, I'm going to have to earn this. Like, I'm not good enough to play here yet. And eventually you bust your butt so you can take steps up the rung to do it. Is that even something people do anymore? Like, and then my flip side is no one told me I was going to be good. I think that helps when you are a 16-year-old and you have already an NIL price tag. That must be so different. Like, I don't even know how to wrap my head around this.
I think it boils down to the individual and how what their family unit was like, and their mentors around them. Okay. Teachers, advisors, whatever. If they were coddled and they felt a sense of entitlement before they got to college, that will be exacerbated. If they weren't raised that way, they'll probably be in a better position to see their NIL evaluation at age 15 and say, you know what? I don't care about that. That's meaningless. It's on paper. I've got to prove it. So it boils down to the individual. And I think it's bad for the athletes, because I think anytime you're given stuff like that, or people are telling you how good you are before you play one down of college football, I don't think that's a good thing, because I think if you pay too much attention to it, and coaches talk about this all the time, don't worry about outside noise. Well, that's part of outside noise today. And if you are an athlete and you worry about that outside noise, it's going to affect you. Maybe you don't work as hard in the weight room. Maybe you don't work as hard in the film room. Maybe you don't work as hard in practice.
Well, Jeff, you said you showed up in 95. There was really limited outside noise. I mean, other than like reading a paper, you're not jumping on the internet to really find much. I mean, I guess you could, but you had to dial it up. No one had a dial. Neither here nor there. How much more difficult it is to be a 19 through 22. Like we say coddled, and we say this, this next generation. So all these things, but also I think we've created it. We've given them all these tools, and now we're saying that they're bad. Like, so, I mean, it's so hard for me to get in the mind of an 18 through 22-year-old when you could tell me I'm worth $1 million. I'll never think I'm not worth less than that. But that's my high school self, not my college. I've never played a snap in college. It's the same thing with the NFL. Guys are drafted in the first round don't ever play, or play very little. I don't even know where I was going with that, but the outside noise. That's where I'm at, Jeff. From 95 to now, how do you even potentially think of, no matter if you have mentors or the best people around you, you still see this, you still hear it. There's Twitter, there's Facebook, there's Instagram. Dude, there's people are telling me that I'm wrong on what's this called? On YouTube. Like, there's so much do you know what I'm saying? Like, there's just so much. How does a kid just internalize some of these things, or not internalize? It must be impossible.
I'm old school, obviously. I'm also as old as dirt, but I'm one who believes that progress, quote, progress, is not always good, because there are unintended consequences, which you just labeled. I mean, the world has changed dramatically. And I personally think that the majority of athletes are still they want to be coached. They want to be coached hard. They want to be coached fairly. They are willing to work their butts off. Okay. But the more that they hear that they're worth something before they've performed, the tougher that is, especially if you're weak-minded or if you have people in your ear saying, don't listen to him. Or if you have other coaches at other teams recruiting you before you're even in the portal, reaching out to maybe a third party and saying, you know what, that guy's going to have to develop you. You come here, we're going to develop you. We're going to pay you more. So that's all part of how the system has changed, which has been lauded as, player movement, players being paid for their worth. But I don't necessarily view that as all good for the athlete. But it's the genie is out of the bottle. We're not going back. I personally would like to see, and I've said this before, player unions, you're pros. If you're going to have a pro system, you're going to be 100% pro. Okay, you can be cut, salary caps, union. You're going to have holdouts, all that stuff. You're already having holdouts from bowl games or guys leaving during the season. So go 100% or don't. It's like we're dipping our toe in the professional pool. No, dive in head first and make it just like the NFL. Or you can't have a little bit of this, a little bit of that.
I love that. So let's get down. Let's do a little bit more. I like this. You could be cut. Although, it's hard because you have a scholarship. So it's what are you going to do? I guess you could cut people and still have them go to their academic scholarships. I'm a big fan for contracts. I think that's where we have to go because you're having dudes jump every year. I'm a big fan for salary. I'm a big fan for it looking just like the NFL.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan to take it to the bowl game stuff that you get a bonus to go to a bowl game, just like you get a bonus to go to the playoffs. Or if you win the Super Bowl, you get a bonus. There should be these things. I think it should be just like the NFL. You are a pro. You're getting paid to do something in college. It doesn't matter where it is, but you're getting paid to play a sport.
Well, if you have a system like that, you are training the athletes for the world that they hope to enter after they stay in school for whether it's 3 or 4 or 5 years. So they know exactly what they're getting into. I mean, it makes complete sense that the stumbling block is going to be, will players agree to collective bargaining, or will we ever have a system that allows that? I don't know if we'll ever see that, but to me, that would solve myriad issues that we've talked about and will be talked about for a long time.
In the words of Cardale Jones, I ain't come here to play school.
Yeah. School's not important anymore. It's bananas to me.
No, we already talked about that.
It's unbelievable.
It doesn't matter.
Jeff, so question for you quickly. You might know more than me, Matt Perkins. Maybe you do too. The Michigan kids getting paid $10 million to go to Michigan. Can Michigan say, or can whoever's given that money say, you're going to sign this piece of paper that says you're only getting 2.5 each year or bill or it scales? Can the university enact something like that? Is that a possibility, or they can't do anything like that?
I haven't paid attention to the latest of 500 court rulings and cases to know exactly what is still acceptable, what can't. But I think that it appears that that's the direction this is heading, where you have, call them contracts, call them agreements, call them whatever, where you have written language that you will be paid this much, whether it's installments, you'll be expected to stay here for X number of years. It kind of gets back to what we talked about. You're a rookie. You sign a 4-year deal. You can't transfer from the Packers to the Vikings in year 2 because you don't like how year 1 went. That, to me, is how we should pattern it. And then you limit player movement, but you satisfy some other things in terms of building continuity, building culture, having fans be able to say, "Oh, wow, that guy's been here for 2 years. I remember when he was a freshman," which you're losing some of that now. I personally think, to call me nostalgic, but I don't think that's good when fans, if they start to lose and can't identify with the players.
The other thing that's been in the news that really, I'm just going to say it scares me, is the idea of venture capital in college athletics, and basically people buying or groups buying football programs, basketball programs, entire athletic departments, who knows? Like that to me makes it just at that point, what's the purpose of even being attached to a university? It might as well be the Madison Incorporated Badgers.
Well, that's where this is headed. I mean, and it's been headed, as the NC2A lost in court, and as there were more suits, and as we saw the direction this is headed, and we've talked about the academic angle, which is completely forgotten in most conversations. Yeah, that's where it's headed. And do I like to see it that way? No. I mean, if I were just a fan of a particular team, would I like to see it that way? No, unless, of course, a really rich guy bought my team and then we'd get all the best players every year. Then you'll see the fans go, because, I mean, do you think Oregon fans are lamenting this system right now? Absolutely not. They've got Phil Knight. There was a recruit he had the other day talking about, he's let me design my own shoes. I mean, a lot of schools can't compete with that. But that's where we are today. And it's not going to the pendulum's not going to swing back to the old way. It's going to continue to go toward what you just mentioned, the venture capital angle.
All right, so I know we only have about 12, 13 minutes. Let's bring it back to the Badgers for a time being, because the landscape is absolutely outrageous. It's like, what's that movie when there are two men enter, one man leave? That's what it's Thunderdome. Like the whole landscape's it's barren and crazy, and people are just fighting for water. It's nuts. Let's bring it back to the Badgers, Jeff. What do the Badgers need to do moving forward to have any type of success next year?
Well, I'll go back to what I wrote before last season, where I said, don't worry about the record. Do you want, as a fan, you want to see player development, unit development, better football. You want to see progress. Now, the record was lesser, but part of that had to do with the schedule. But I personally, and Bernie, maybe you disagree with me, maybe you agree, I don't know, but I didn't see a lot of player development, individuals, maybe a couple guys here or there flashed, and hey, they're better in year 2 than year 1, but I didn't see a lot of units improving. The head coach certainly agreed with me on terms of the offense, because otherwise he wouldn't have fired his offensive coordinator. So I didn't see cleaner football. And to me, and I wrote this, the most telling games were not losing to Penn State or Oregon or Alabama or failing to show up in the second half at USC. It was getting your butts kicked in every imaginable way by Nebraska, Iowa, and Minnesota. You cannot lose those games. You cannot get embarrassed in those games. If your goal is to win championships, you're not going to win championships if you lose to those rivals. You're not going to get in the playoff if you lose to those rivals. And there's a good chance you're not going to make a bowl game if you lose to those rivals, which is where the program is today as they try to get things back on track in 2025.
No, I think we've talked about it here. I mean, the player development, it seems like everyone took a step back. Flashes in the pot, though, for sure. Like guys have played good games here, and here. But again, mental errors, mistakes everywhere, penalties, just things that don't happen in a year. They happen to us like every game. It feels like that.
Yeah.
So I don't think we're there yet. I think it's hard. I think it's hard to develop players when you need to win. This is what to me is now we're going to go to the portal for a quarterback because we do need to win. I mean, this is the day and age where I think Fickell's here for the long run because I don't think we can pay to buy him out. He's worth a lot of money that Wisconsin might not have right now. And also, what do you say? You're going to say, hey, we're going to give this guy $7+ million a year and only for $4 and then pay him out. And we already bought Paul Christ out for $11 million out of the 20, which he's gave up. Like so we're like throwing millions of dollars. I don't even have $1 million cents. I don't even have $1 million cents. So like doing these things, I think, are not the right thing. I think to have a culture like Barry came in and created that culture in 3 or 4 years, but he had some pretty bad years. Mm-hmm. So I'm not saying that I'm not saying that Barry and him are the same because that's not no one's Barry. But we got to give him some years. I'm just not a fan of. I think we have to go to the transfer portal for certain groups. Defense for sure. Scheme has to change on the defense. I think Fickell will address that. It might not be next year. But if we play as poor, Jeff, what about Western Michigan? Was it Western Michigan? North Dakota, Michigan?
South Dakota.
They ran over us. They did what they want. I mean, these are things like, listen, I remember we still lost games, Jeff. You remember we did lose games. We lost to UNLV one year. Like we lost games. So I'm not saying it doesn't happen. But it's a trend that we were getting beat on the run all year long, and we couldn't do anything about it. Jeff, is that coaching or is that players?
I'll say this about Fickell. I think the original decisions to hire Bicknell and Longo set the offense back, delayed the offense's development. And now you're going philosophically in a different direction. If you would have gone that direction before the first year, you wouldn't be here with the offense you are today. I think there's some things he's got to address on defense. I don't know that he will this offseason. And if you have another difficult year, his hand may be forced to do so defensively. That run defense and the inability to get to the passer. I mean, it's one thing if you can get to the passer on third down consistently and you're a little soft against the run. If you're soft against the run and you can't get to the passer on third down, how are you going to stop people? Okay? I don't think he's going to make a change at defensive coordinator this year. I mean, there's been no rumblings or anything like that.
Totally.
But, man, if the defense struggles again next year, what do you do? And I'll say this. In a perfect world, you want to give a coach X number of years to build a culture and get things up and running. You don't want to have to keep buying guys out. But the world has changed. And you got a guy at Arizona State. That program was a train wreck. In year two, they win their league championship, the Big 12, and they're in the college football playoff. Indiana had a softer schedule than Wisconsin this year, no doubt about it. But that program was a train wreck. Who would have predicted Indiana's going to be in a college football playoff before Wisconsin, before this year? No one would have. And so everything's changed. So here's my concern if you're a fan. They have a tough year in year 3, in 2025. The record isn't good, and you don't see a lot of development. You can talk about buyouts, but if I'm a person writing out the checks, the boosters, the big guys, I'd be getting a little concerned if year 3 you don't see some progress. And again, I'm not talking about record, because on paper it looks like a really demanding schedule. But you've got to see some progress in development of players and units and just looking like a better football team that is more competitive consistently.
And we've talked about this because in 2001 we didn't go to a bowl game, and it was very not great for everyone. I redshirted, so I didn't really have much of a part in it. That's not true, but we're in the same spot. What I'm saying is, you saw like this, Jeff. This was still Barry Alvarez's team. One blip, 2022. We went to a bowl game. We won. We didn't have a winning record, although we might have ended with a winning record. But we beat Colorado in the Alamo Bowl. Yeah. But you saw dudes get better every year. You still saw competitive games. There's some blowouts here and there, but not many. Every time Ohio State came into town or we went there, we beat them. It's just that fabric has been lost. Where, listen, I don't think we can beat. Could we have beaten in 2004? We went 9-0. 5 teams in the top 10. Maybe not. That's a big cup of it's a huge task. I don't know what the words are, but Jeff, what are some of the games you saw in the past or teams or things or people that you've seen and you're like, man, that's awesome. Like some awesome Wisconsin moments, like Jimmy Leonard dunking a basketball, winning the dunk contest. That to me was one of the coolest things I've ever seen. Not because it was Jimmy. You're looking at a dude who was like 5'6" and was dunking with ease.
I've seen that video a few times to no one's surprise. I don't know. I look back. I mean, seeing Alvarez's teams win back-to-back Big Ten titles in 98 and 99 after, you win the first Rose Bowl, you have some slippage in 94, you go 4-5-2 in 95, and people are thinking, what the hell's going on? The Rose Bowl is an anomaly. And then Ron Dane comes, and then you build up an offensive line, you build up a defense over the course of 96, 97, when they and they got their butts kicked by a really good Georgia team down in Tampa in the bowl game. That Georgia team had studs on it, and they got killed, but they had some young guys who blossomed in 98 and then got better in 99. So you saw that dip, then you saw them recover from it. You saw kind of a dip in 2, 3, it got better in 4. Then Barry's last year, they had a really good team in 05. So I've watched the program for a long time. They've always recovered from dips, but the world has changed right now. And I've said this before, I saw more reasons for concern last year in watching the games than I saw reasons for optimism that things were trending in the right direction. So I'm really, a long way off, but I'm curious to see in 2025 what the product looks like on the field. And as we sit here today, who knows? I mean, you don't know who's going to be a quarterback, defensive line, linebacker, secondary, wide receiver, tight end. I don't know. And who knows what the new offense is going to look like and whether they're going to have a good guy that they want to run it. Because if that's not the case, what happens?
Jeff, don't be doomsday on us.
Although I'm not being doomsday. I just say, I don't know.
These are.
Do you know what the team's going to look like?
No, they're all question marks. You're 100% right. I will say this, though. I'm not a scientist, Matt Perkins. You are definitely a scientist. The dip was within this it was within this range, right? Back through the last 20 years. Are you nervous that the range is now, the floor is lowered, that the dip can continue to be dug deeper?
Yes. Or I suspect, and I said this before when Fickell was first hired, because the face of the Big Ten has changed. You have more teams now. You don't have two divisions. It's tougher to finish in the top two, which is now what's required to get into a championship game. And so I think that the opportunity to be consistently good or better than in a given year against an Oregon, Penn State, Michigan, Ohio State, whoever, all those teams, and eventually probably Washington, that guy will get that program up and running. He did it at Arizona, Jed Fish. So you have more teams to try to be better than. And if you can't beat your rivals, you're going to finish in a position in the standings that just a few years ago was unimaginable to fans. And once you get in that, if you get in that rut, it's damn hard to get out of it. Because look how, when Barry took over, that program was a disaster. It was a disaster. I mean, anyone who didn't live through that era, the Don Morton era, didn't know how far the fall had gone from Morton to Dave McClain, who was a solid coach and really had some really solid teams, because the Don Morton era was just embarrassing.
Yeah. Our guy Eddie Fletcher tells us all the time that it was bad news Bears during that period. But he was there for Barry. He said it changed.
Wasn't even that good.
Yeah. He said overnight, though, Barry changed a lot. Just, again, what you're saying, what I think the theme is, it wasn't in the wins and losses. No, it was in the losses. It wasn't in the wins or at the end of the year, but it was in the player development, the team development. JD said, you had Don Davey, you had dudes who played in the NFL for years. They just didn't play as a team. So I know, Matt Perkins, we're gonna get out of here soon, but
I've just got a couple rapid fire questions before we wind up. Okay, first one: loudest moment in Camp Randall Stadium.
For me,
yeah, that you attended.
The one that stands out, two of them, it would probably be a tie. 2010, David Guillory's kickoff return. 2005, John Stocco weaving his way with his nimble feet through 15 Michigan defenders for the game-winning touchdown.
I was in the stadium for that one. That was probably the loudest moment, along with one of Bernie's hurdles in 2004. Probably the loudest I've ever heard the stadium. Second question: who's the most quotable coach you covered?
Quotable coach. We're just talking to football guys, huh?
Yeah.
Head coaches or assistants?
Either.
Most quotable.
Or who had the best quotes?
I always enjoyed talking, and Bernie will know these names, John Palermo and Jim Huber, respectively D-line coach and O-line coach when I covered the team, because they were not afraid. They were old school, not afraid to talk football, and you had to bleep out every third word that they said because it could not be repeated anywhere.
What player was the most engaging to interview or talk to?
Oh, man. Oh, that's Dakota Dixon would be one that stands out. I mean, everyone knows his story about his upbringing. I remember sitting with him in the lobby of the Student Athlete Performance Center. It was an interview, but it was more of a conversation. We sat for more than an hour and just talked for the story I wrote. So and there's a long line of them. I mean, off the top of my head, I couldn't tell you, but that one really stands out just to sit with one guy and talk football.
Most impressive physical specimen you've seen as an athlete on the Badgers?
Biggest guy I ever saw on a Wisconsin team was Aaron Gibson. It was the year that he was ineligible to play. He came out of the locker room, was heading out of the weight room, and I was Bernie, where the couches were down there in the basement. And he had shorts on and shoes, no shirt. And I looked at his back and I thought, that is the largest human being I've ever seen. And he was massive.
And finally, your favorite destination to cover another game?
Big Ten would be Iowa would probably be one because it's a tight place and the fans are really into it. Although Penn State might be the loudest of all the Big Ten stadiums. I mean, I don't know if it's the way it's constructed, but that place gets incredibly loud. And a whiteout at that place is absolutely incredible.
Jeff, I jumped off sides in 2003, maybe there. And let me tell you that not only did Coach Huber have some choice words for me, John Palermo did too. He came off the defensive side, was always like to the left. He loved to tell you that you really did something wrong. I don't know if that coaching's like just can't happen anymore, or you just don't see it. But
I think it's less. You get fewer examples of old school. I remember JP going up chest to chest at a preseason camp with an offensive lineman because they were screaming at each other. And I've never seen it get physical between a player and a coach. There were no swings, but there were some words exchanged.
It was an interesting day and age, as we say, 2 decades ago. Sadly, you really had to. I mean, Jeff, you were that whole squad. You're talking about, like, even John Detman. You had to have thick, tough-skinned mindset that said these guys can MF you up, down, left, and right, and you're still not going to care about it. I don't know. That's a hard mindset. It was hard for me. Like the first 2 years, I was like, man, these guys are trying to like mentally break me. But once you like figure it out, but it's hard to figure that out it's like a mental beating every single day.
Well, what's the cliche? Don't listen to how they say it. Listen to what they say.
Coach White actually came up to me. Yeah, Coach White came up to me and he goes, "If Huber's talking to you, that's a good sign because he doesn't." Yes. And then you actually realize, like, he doesn't talk to these dudes who he doesn't care. Sadly, doesn't care about. Yeah. But he's like, if he's MFing you, he thinks you can do better. I was like, wow, blew my mind. I'm like, what about John Palermo, Coach White? He's like, no, never, don't worry about that guy. But lo and behold, John Palermo's the reason I came to Wisconsin. So, like, if I knew, I would have given him I would have let him say whatever he wants to me. But man, whole different time, Matt Perkins. Ooh, that's why I have such a big neck to hold a thick skin on my brain.
Thicker skull than normal, right?
I hope so.
I would certainly hope so, given the way that you played the game. But we appreciate you, Jeff, for hopping in here with us today on Believe in Badgers on the Believe Network, presented by BetOnline.ag and Oak Ridge Wealth Management. Make sure you follow Jeff on Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it at JPO1961. Subscribe, rate, review, all that good stuff. You know what to do. Please help us grow. Please leave us some comments, especially if you are listening to this on audio on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or whatever. That's what helps us grow the most. We'll be back again sometime soon with more voices, more Badger thoughts. Who knows? Maybe there'll be a new quarterbacks coach. Maybe they'll grab some guys in the portal. You never know what's happening around the program these days. But until then, we appreciate everyone tuning in. And until next time, on Wisconsin.
On Wisconsin.